Take a look at this woman. She thought her husband had been lying unconscious in bed for 6 months, his life hanging by a thread. But when she pulled back the bed curtains, what she saw was an unbelievably handsome face. And a body too irresistible to ignore. But could this really be the husband who had been in a coma for 6 months? In truth, the heroine had somehow transmigrated into the world of a novel. Not only did she inherit the original owner's memories, she also got her beauty. Alice never expected that on her very first day after transmigrating, she would be threatened by her husband's stepmother and told to personally kill her own son. Lady Quillian is the senior madam of the Dyerla ducal house, while the heroine, Alice, is the young Duchess of House Dyerla. Though Alice was a noble woman, she was not wealthy. Her only truly happy memory was being held in her mother's arms as a child. Caught between an older brother who was the heir and a sickly younger sister, she lived a quiet life of constant compromise and endurance. Then she was sold off to the ducal family and married into it. Alice suddenly remembered a novel about a wife who, under her mother-in-law's orders, killed her own husband. But since it was a fantasy romance, that woman, Alice, was merely a minor side character who only briefly appeared in the synopsis. Alice also realized that if she killed her husband just like in the story, he would truly die. There was no way she could let something like that happen. She had finally met a peerless, handsome man. How could she possibly let him die? It would be a waste not to at least appreciate him a little. Now that she had transmigrated into another world, there was no way she was going to use poison to kill her husband. So a sleepless Alice sat in front of her handsome husband, grumbling about the unfairness of their fates. At dawn, Alice jolted awake from a nightmare. When she opened her eyes, her wandering hand had already slipped inside her husband's clothes, and she was enthusiastically feeling him up. Kalis Dyerla had collapsed because of poison from his stepmother, but he was originally a highly capable young duke. Soon after, Alice was led by a maid to stand before the stepmother. Alice bowed respectfully, only to be met with contempt. At that moment, the doctor Lady Quillian had been eagerly waiting for also appeared. His name was Helkin. On the surface, he was a physician, but in secret, he was a bizarre genius who specialized in poisons. It was under Lady Quillian's orders that he made the colorless, odorless poison. By then, Alice had already come up with a plan. Helkin told Lady Quillian that within 3 months, this poison would cause the victim's organs to begin rotting, leaving no trace behind. So even if an autopsy were performed later, no one would know. Lady Quillian thought 3 months was a bit troublesome, because her son Edelm still had to wait until he was 16. Before His Majesty would approve his inheritance of the title. So Helkin, taking her anxiety into account, prepared a sleeping drug. Lady Quillian could first let Kalis inherit the dukedom, then transfer the title to her own son once he came of age. That way, the vassals would have nothing to object to. Helkin also said that with careful control of the sleeping poison, it could be stretched out for 6 months. So the task of administering the poison was handed to Alice. Helkin later sought her out in private to tell her the proper dosage. Alice said, "You're 35 this year, a highly knowledgeable medical expert. Your hobby is collecting poisonous plants, isn't it?" Helkin had not expected the Duchess to know him so well. Alice replied that she had looked into him a little and found some rather unexpected things. Helkin suddenly acted very confident, as if he had nothing to hide from the senior madam. But Alice seemed completely certain of victory and asked him why, knowing all that, he still dared lay hands on the Duke's property. Helkin shouted back, insisting she had no evidence and was slandering him without cause. Suddenly, Alice pointed toward the bookshelf and told him that if someone pushed it over right now, would he still be able to talk so calmly? Helkin immediately grabbed Alice and begged her not to do it. In truth, behind that bookshelf were the rare poisonous herbs Helkin had collected, worth as much as an entire mansion. After Kalis collapsed, Helkin took advantage of the chaos caused by the Duke's absence to secretly steal a family heirloom from the ducal house and use it to buy the toxic plants. Alice calmly smiled and said, "If I tell Mother about this, do you think you'll survive?" By then, Helkin was trembling in fear. Alice told him not to panic. She said she wouldn't kill him. She just wanted to make a deal. This man was the only remaining retainer of Kalis still left in House Dyerla, the butler, Adolf. For the sake of public image, Lady Quillian pretended to devote herself to the Duke and had the butler feed him medicine. But in reality, it had no effect at all. In order to drive the butler away from Kaelus's side and finish the Duke off completely, she arranged for Alice to come in. Alice told Adolphe that Dr. Helkin had personally brought her the medicine. A strange look appeared on Adolphe's face. Kaelus lost his mother right after he was born, and after his mother's funeral ended, the stepmother who had just entered the household. Lady Quillian also lost her own child at birth. An obscure noblewoman lost her child, and everyone thought Lady Quillian would be driven out. But she was lucky. Not long after, the Duke suffered a riding accident and was left with impaired mobility. Because of various scandals, the ducal family's prestige plummeted. The retainers had no choice but to entrust the Duke's affairs to Lady Quillian. At the time, Kaelus was only 2 years old. From then on, Lady Quillian controlled the ducal family. But as Kaelus gradually grew up, he began to disgust her, so Lady Quillian was determined to kill Kaelus at any cost. She not only poisoned his food, she even sent assassins after him. But all of it ended in failure. So she sent the 12-year-old Kaelus off to war. Everyone thought Kaelus would die on the battlefield. Yet, to everyone's surprise, he returned stronger than ever. On top of that, because he made enormous contributions during the war, Kaelus formally inherited the ducal title at 16. It was a perfect return by every measure, except that during his years at war, he had suddenly acquired a younger brother. After that, Lady Quillian moved to a separate residence. Perhaps because Kaelus spent the next 10 years focusing on rebuilding the nearly bankrupt ducal house, he temporarily forgot about her existence. Lady Quillian did not fully trust Alice, so she sent a maid to watch her. But how could any of them know that Alice had already finished laying out her plan? What Alice gave Kaelus was not poison, but a nutrient solution Helkin had prepared. Back then, Alice had asked him to make an antidote. Helkin told her there was no antidote for the poison the Duke had taken. In fact, even without more poison, if he were simply left untreated, he would die within a year. The poison would only make him die faster. So Alice told Helkin to make a nutrient solution in a color similar to the poison instead. Alice truly wanted to save him, but she had already done all she could. Even so, she sighed, he was so handsome, yet destined to die young. What a waste. At that moment, Alice noticed a severe wound on his hand. When she saw the festering injury on his arm, she felt a pang of sympathy. Suddenly, a dazzling light appeared in her hand, and she realized the wound on his arm had already healed by nearly half. Alice then remembered that this healing light was holy power. But the original Alice was not supposed to have that kind of ability. Could this be some reward for transmigrating? There was no time to think about that now. She placed her hand on Kaelus's arm again, focusing only on making the wound heal. This time, the wound closed completely. Alice sighed that heaven at least had some conscience. Then she stopped lingering and left his room. Deep within Kaelus's consciousness, he was still being devoured by the poison. When he was almost unable to hold on any longer within that space of consciousness, a beam of light appeared. He knew it was the light of hope. "Wake up, Kaelus." When he finally came to, he only felt terribly uncomfortable all over. Perhaps he had been lying there too long, so he decided to sneak out for a bit. It was then that Kaelus noticed the wound on his arm had miraculously healed. That was a black magic wound Kaelus had received in war. Neither holy power nor magic had any effect on it, so it should never have healed. On top of that, after lying down for so long, he had assumed it must have rotted badly. He never expected that one sleep would heal it. Kaelus decided that the most important thing right now was to find out what the current situation was. Taking advantage of the dead of night, Kaelus went to find Adolphe. When Adolphe saw the Duke awake, he trembled with excitement. Adolphe then explained the current state of the family. The senior madam had driven the aide and the knight commander out of the ducal house. Adolphe explained that the Duke had been unconscious for 6 months, and the servants of the ducal house had all become the senior madam's people. There was also a man named Helkin, who had become the ducal physician. And on top of that, you got married. Kaelus was stunned. Meanwhile, Alice learned that Sienna Myrtille was coming. Sienna was only supposed to appear after the Duke's death in the original story, yet she had already entered the stage. That meant the original plotline had become distorted. Sienna Myrtille was the heroine of this novel. Sienna Myrtille had originally rushed to the capital only after hearing the news of her cousin Kaelus's death. Although his death seemed suspicious, Kaelus's funeral was conducted quickly because the Duchess had already been put on trial. for poisoning the Duke. But Sienna Merta believed there had to be someone else behind the Duke's death. Naturally, she grew suspicious of her cousin's stepmother, Lady Quillian, and began investigating. However, before she could find evidence linking Lady Quillian to it, House Diurla was completely erased from the Empire overnight due to the schemes of the true mastermind. Furious over the destruction of the Diurla ducal house, Sienna Merta searched everywhere for the scattered retainers in order to restore the family's honor. By chance, she treated the unfortunate third prince, who had collapsed by the roadside, and just like that, the Baron's daughter and the prince fell in love. Their story ended happily, but the original novel had many plot holes. The problem was that only those two got a happy ending. In the final arc, many of the side characters who had helped the protagonists all died, so Alice had absolutely no desire to get involved with them. She only wanted to escape the ducal house and live quietly. Kalis told Adolf to keep his regained consciousness a secret for the time being. The ducal house was now in Lady Quillian's hands, so Kalis needed time to restore his vassals. As for Alice, Kalis said he could not sympathize with a woman he had never met before. The next day, Alice not only greeted him, she also thought he looked even more handsome today. With embarrassing remarks constantly hanging at her lips, Kalis simply thought she was a madwoman. A maid brought in a basin of water to wipe down the Duke's body. When Alice learned that she was supposed to clean the Duke herself, she froze. The maid assumed the task must be quite shocking for a noble lady. Meanwhile, Alice was blushing at the thought of wiping down a grown man's naked body. Looking at those tempting chest muscles, Alice couldn't help swallowing hard. Alice told the maid to leave first. She wanted to wipe down the Duke herself. At that moment, Alice imagined Kalis as a statue that needed polishing. She carefully began wiping his body. Kalis, meanwhile, found it unbearably ticklish. Alice even told herself she really had a talent for cleaning. Look how shiny he was. Kalis could barely be bothered to complain anymore. Then suddenly, just as Alice was about to wipe farther down, the butler burst in. The moment Alice saw him, it felt like the sky was falling. She instantly panicked and stammered so badly she could hardly speak. But Alice forced herself to stay calm, thinking that acting flustered now would only make her look suspicious. She scolded him for barging in without knocking. Adolf hurriedly apologized. Alice felt her intimidation had worked. Then she asked why he had come in such panic. Adolf said he had heard that the Duchess was doing his servant's work, so he rushed over. Alice said she could understand his surprise. Adolf thanked her for understanding and asked if she would allow him to take over. If she did not trust him, she could stand nearby and supervise. Alice felt like she had been granted a reprieve. She told the butler that the Duke might feel more comfortable if he handled it, then hurriedly fled the room. When Kalis saw that everyone had finally left, he felt that pretending to be asleep was truly exhausting. In Kalis's eyes, Alice was like a woman who had been sold, thrown into the ducal house, and forced to deal with Lady Quillian on top of that. He had assumed she would be timid and fearful, but instead she turned out to be a strange woman. The reason Lady Quillian received the news that Miss Merta was coming to the capital was because Kalis had someone make Baron Merta send a letter calling his daughter to the capital. That would divert Lady Quillian's attention and also allow him to get help from Sienna. Kalis planned to begin his formal move once Sienna arrived. He also told Adolf to bring Helkin to him. He wanted to see the man personally. Soon, Sienna Merta appeared in the capital, beautiful as a splendid rose. Alice thought she was even more beautiful than the novel had described. Sienna ignored Lady Quillian and walked straight up to Alice to greet her. Alice thought, why is she trying to get me killed the moment she arrives? Possessed by a fierce survival instinct, Alice scolded her for greeting in the wrong order. She should first greet the elder of the ducal house, the senior madam. Does Baron Merta's house not even know that much etiquette? Sienna had no choice but to apologize to Lady Quillian. But Lady Quillian already seemed displeased by Sienna's earlier behavior. Before that, Alice had asked Helkin, didn't you say last time that the Duke's condition could absolutely not improve? Could holy power perhaps relieve pain or heal his wounds? Helkin said that was impossible too. The Duke was in a state from which he could never awaken. No treatment would work. Alice couldn't understand how his wounds had healed. If not by holy power, then how? For now, she could only continue feeding the Duke his medicine. Halfway through feeding him, Alice told Helkin to drink the rest. She wanted to confirm whether it was really a nutrient tonic or poison. Helkin drank it down without hesitation and sincerely declared that he could never betray her. Seeing nothing suspicious about him, Alice was reassured. Not long after, Adolf came to find Helkin. Helkin said, "Hasn't the Duke already been given his medicine?" Adolf bowed toward the Duke, lying in bed. Then Helkin saw Kalis suddenly sit up in bed. He immediately dropped to his knees, thinking this couldn't be real. Kalis said that just seeing him do nothing had frightened Helkin so much. "Since a madman like you has nothing useful to say, should I just kill you now? You're the one who made the poison to kill me, aren't you?" Helkin explained that he had only followed the senior madam's orders and had not even known who the poison was meant for at first. Kalis thought that might be true, but the fact remained, he had still swallowed poison made by Helkin. Adolf said that since Helkin had made the poison, he should know the treatment method too, so they ought to see what he could do first. After a moment's thought, Kalis decided to spare him for now. Then he asked when the Duchess had started administering the medicine. Helkin told him it began 4 days ago. Kalis remembered that he had awakened 4 days ago as well. Was that medicine really only a nutrient solution? Helkin explained that it was simply a tonic with no medicinal effect, used in place of the poison. Kalis couldn't understand. Wasn't Alice the woman planted in the ducal house through Lady Quillian's hands? Why would she disobey her orders? He couldn't tell what she was planning, but he knew his awakening had something to do with Alice. Kalis told Helkin to examine his physical condition. As Helkin checked him, a shocked expression appeared on his face. He said that although the poison had not been fully removed, it had weakened to a point where treatment was now completely possible. "If you're truly useful, then you can make the antidote, right?" Helkin said he could finish it in a few days. Kalis warned him to keep his awakening secret from the Duchess, and from Lady Quillian as well. "If word gets out, I'll tell Lady Quillian you're a double agent. Whether it's by her hand or mine, you'll die." Meanwhile, Alice had originally wanted to avoid the heroine, Sienna, but instead she was dragged out for a walk, with Sienna saying she wanted to grow closer to her. Alice knew perfectly well that those words weren't sincere. Though Sienna was righteous and kind, that only extended to her own people. Alice knew very well how merciless Sienna could be toward enemies, especially for someone like herself, practically one of Lady Quillian's subordinates. There was no way Sienna could truly like her. She figured Sienna probably wanted to extract information about Lady Quillian from her, or perhaps use her to set some sort of trap. So Alice quickly played along, saying, "I'm truly happy to hear you say that, my lady. Actually, I felt terribly guilty about speaking so harshly to you yesterday, just because I had to watch Mother's mood." Sienna told her not to blame herself. Yesterday, Sienna herself had been too rash. Sienna thought Alice seemed kind-hearted and said she hoped they could chat like this often. Alice replied that she still had to care for the Duke, so she would be taking her leave. But Alice knew this would not do. She had to get out of here quickly before the real battle began. It was then that Alice finally remembered her ability. There was a special law in the Empire regarding holy power. If one became a priest or priestess under the temple's protection, then even nobles could not casually touch them. The only one who could judge clergy was the Pope. So Alice wanted to become a temple official. That way, even Lady Quillian would be unable to harm her. Just as Alice was rejoicing, she discovered there was another condition. Only a pure person could qualify to become temple clergy. But Alice had already been married. Legally speaking, she could no longer be considered pure. Her eligibility was therefore ambiguous. Alice wanted to visit the temple in person and ask about the application process. But Lady Quillian would never easily allow Alice to leave the house. Still, Alice had no intention of giving up this chance. That day she discovered that the one who came was not the butler Adolf, but Helkin. Helkin looked helpless and explained that all the servants in the ducal residence were so busy they were overwhelmed, so he had come instead. With no other choice, Alice had him wipe down the Duke's body. This instantly threw Helkin into a panic. Alice immediately noticed how odd that reaction was. Helkin hurriedly explained that he was only flustered because he had never done this before. So Alice wiped the Duke's upper body first. Helkin couldn't help asking, "Madam, is this really how you always do it?" Alice asked what the problem was, then explained that she simply treated the Duke's body like an expensive statue rather than a person's body. Hearing that, Helkin nearly failed to contain himself. Alice kept feeling that Helkin was acting strangely. She demanded to know whether he was hiding something from her. Helkin suddenly began stammering, not knowing how to answer. At that moment, the Duke lying on the bed suddenly opened his eyes. Helkin screamed in fright. Helkin quickly explained that he just hadn't been feeling well lately. Just then, Adolf arrived in time. To both Alice and Helkin, Adolf looked like a savior. After they left, Kalis was furious. He had nearly exposed himself. Adolf asked the Duke if he was feeling all right. Kalis only felt irritated. Just thinking of that woman felt like having a thorn stuck in his throat. Not only did she keep greeting him all the time, she also occasionally muttered inexplicable things to herself. And she had gone against Lady Quillian's orders by switching out the poison, which made him even more suspicious. The fact that she hadn't poisoned Kalis only made her intentions harder to understand. He considered her dangerous. If she could even deceive Lady Quillian, then she was even harder to predict than expected. There was no choice but to think about how to deal with her later. After learning that his cousin Sienna had arrived at the estate, he decided to have Adolf notify her to come to his room before dawn. When Sienna saw her awakened cousin, tears filled her eyes. Kalis was relieved to see his cousin again as well. He hoped she could lend him a hand now. Sienna was full of fighting spirit at the thought of helping her cousin. The first task Kalis gave Sienna was to go to the temple. At that moment, the three women were chatting and laughing in the garden. But beneath the surface, it was a fierce clash between Lady Quillian and Sienna. Sienna seemed like a hawk soaring high, while Lady Quillian seemed like a fox curled up with no chance of winning. In a scene like that, Alice felt like a completely unnecessary presence. She was nothing like Sienna, the kind of heroine who could stomp around high society and slap side characters in the face. Rather than that, Alice was more concerned with how to get to the temple. Then suddenly, one remark from Sienna about going out gave Alice hope, and the destination was the temple. Inside, Kalis had told her to find an excuse to leave the ducal house, then go to Roy Street in the slums. There was an inn there called Morningstar. She was to show this to the owner, James, and say she was looking for someone named Tesselai. Then he would give her information. Kalis wanted to find his former aide, Tesselai, because only then could he easily gather the knights. So Sienna used Kalis's health as an excuse and said she wanted to go to the temple to pray for him. Alice said that, as the Duchess, she felt ashamed. Lady Quillian pinned her hope of stopping Sienna from going out on Alice, but that was obviously impossible. Alice also wanted to go with Sienna to the temple. This shocked Lady Quillian. After Sienna left, Lady Quillian flew into a rage and demanded to know why Alice hadn't stopped her. She also warned her not to let news from the ducal house leak out. Alice told her, "Only by doing this can I keep an eye on her. If we blindly forbid her from going out, she'll only grow suspicious. And if she writes to Baron Merta because of that, and the Baron personally comes to visit the ducal house, wouldn't he come to check on the Duke's condition? Then the news that the Duke can never wake up might cause an uproar throughout the capital." Alice used the excuse that they had to protect the ducal house's public standing until Lady Quillian's son came of age, and that there could be no mistakes before then. In the end, Lady Quillian agreed to let Alice go. Very soon, Alice would finally be able to go to the temple. Later, when Kalis learned that the Duchess would be going too, he seemed puzzled as well. Sienna said the Duchess seemed rather foolish. That made Kalis feel uneasy. Sienna also said that with her pink hair, golden eyes, and tiny frame, she was like a little puppy constantly watching Lady Quillian's expression. But in Kalis's view, Alice was not just observant. She had also deceived both Lady Quillian and Helkin. He suspected she might be hiding her true purpose in front of Sienna as well. Kalis warned her that even if Alice looked foolish, they still had to be cautious just in case. To figure out that woman's true intentions, he wanted Adolf's help. The next morning, Adolf thought Alice had been working too hard, so he wiped down the Duke's body ahead of time. This left Alice puzzled. She assumed it was simply something Lady Quillian had ordered. Adolf explained that the senior madam would not know and told her to rest properly during this time. After Adolf left, Alice felt a little disappointed. She realized she had begun to feel differently about the Duke. Alice thought, could it be because I'm someone who is about to leave this house? So I can't keep thinking about you anymore. When Kalis learned that her goal was actually to leave this place, he couldn't help feeling somewhat ashamed. Having just arrived, Alice rode in a carriage straight out of a novel for the first time and was extremely excited. Sienna hadn't expected her to be in such a good mood. Alice explained that she hadn't been out in a long time, so she had told Mother she wanted to go out with Sienna. A temple official told them that special prayer services were prepared for nobles. Unlike commoners, nobles donated enormous sums to the temple, and the higher their rank, the better the treatment. Sienna used that to request a private prayer session. saying she wanted to pray with a sincere heart and full concentration. Though Alice remembered Lady Quillian's instructions, there was no way she would let that woman get her wish. Alice wanted to handle her own business alone as well. So after entering the prayer room, Alice discovered a book about holy power. This book had been written by the first great pope, Nestor Ropel. Holy power was a blessing from God, but not everyone possessed the same kind of holy power. Just as every mage's magical energy differs, the holy power granted to clergy varies according to divine will. Someone who can warm the body or heal minor wounds is a low-ranking cleric. Someone who can heal severe external wounds could be called a high-ranking cleric, but someone who can instantly heal wounds or treat internal injuries is rare even among high-ranking clergy. Alice had not expected that even among high priests or priestesses, she would count as an exceptionally rare case. After thinking it over, Alice decided that having ability was nice, but if she became too powerful, then there would be burdensome duties and responsibilities, plus endless socializing with nobles. That would go against her plan for a free life. Alice decided it might be best to hide her true level of power and live quietly. Just then, a junior cleric brought Alice a cup of tea. A junior cleric was much closer to what Alice had imagined for herself, but she still couldn't help asking whether anyone had ever married and then become clergy. The cleric told her there was currently no such precedent, but then he remembered a married lady who developed holy power and had once become clergy. Although she had been educated in the temple since childhood and had never undergone the formal blessing rite, anyone who suddenly manifested holy power could become clergy regardless of qualifications. This gave Alice a glimmer of hope. She was clearly delighted. The cleric took out an application form for temple registration and said the document might help her friend. He told her that first, in the special remarks section, she had to write that she possessed holy power. After that, she would undergo a holy power examination at the temple. Once the power was confirmed, the registration process would begin. But of course, that friend was Alice herself. The junior cleric exchanged names with her. Alice thought Roland was a very beautiful name. When they returned, Lady Quillian had already been waiting for quite a while and thought they had come back too late. Sienna gave a whole explanation, saying it was all for reviving the Duke's house and restoring the family's fate, so it wasn't troublesome at all. Lady Quillian could only smile awkwardly. But after Sienna left, she muttered that the girl was a sly little fox indeed. Then she started questioning Alice about why she had come back so late and whether she had gone somewhere else. Alice immediately denied it and told her that she had asked the temple official guarding the corridor, and Miss Sienna had not stepped out of the prayer room at all. Lady Quillian did not suspect her and instead told her to keep watching Sienna from now on. Finally, she reminded Alice to go feed her husband his medicine. Naturally, Alice agreed outwardly, while in reality, she fed Kalis nutrient tonic instead. But what Alice didn't know was that the slip of paper in her pocket had accidentally fallen out. This time, Alice could only bitterly admit that there was nothing she could do and then left the room. That night, Kalis looked conflicted. He noticed that this time the woman had not even greeted him. She had left while muttering about leaving. That night, Helkin brought out the antidote he had made and handed it to Kalis, but then pulled it back again. Kalis thought Helkin was messing with him. Helkin explained that the detoxification process would be excruciatingly painful. Although he had mixed painkillers into the nutrient tonic Kalis had just taken, it still might not help much. Kalis snatched the antidote away. In his eyes, pain didn't matter. What mattered was that he did not want to keep living in darkness. Later that night, Alice wandered around with an oil lamp, searching for something. She had finally realized that her temple registration application was missing. She reasoned that Lady Quillian had been very quiet, so it probably hadn't fallen into her hands. That left only one possibility: the Duke's room. Sure enough, she found the fallen slip of paper there. Just as she picked it up, Kalis on the bed let out a pained groan. Alice, standing beside him, didn't know what to do for a moment. So in the middle of the night, she dragged Helkin over and demanded to know what was happening to the Duke. Helkin said the sleeping poison in the Duke's body was spreading. Alice, however, thought Helkin must have secretly tampered with something. Helkin explained that this sleeping poison was unusual. It spread through the body periodically. Alice still didn't believe him, but in the end, she sent him away first because she intended to use holy power lower herself to help Kalis recover. Alice had originally not wanted to pity him, but she simply couldn't ignore it. So she tightly held his hand and began releasing her holy power, instantly calming the struggling Kalis's condition. Alice suddenly felt exhausted. A few minutes later, Kalis jolted awake from his dream. When he opened his eyes, he found that woman collapsed over his blanket. He noticed that she really was rather pretty. Pink hair, golden eyes, and a tiny frame. She really did look like a little puppy. Kalis noticed that his body felt incredibly light. While he had been unconscious in the darkness, he had seen a light shine on him. The pain had disappeared, and the feeling was the same as when he had awakened recently. Based on Adolf's earlier account, he realized that Alice was the benefactor who had saved him. Kalis sensed the holy power within her and believed her ability might even rival the Pope's. So Kalis swore he would never let her go, because Alice possessed exactly the power he needed. Then he noticed a slip of paper on the table. He discovered that it was actually a temple registration application. Kalis clenched it tightly and understood why she wanted to leave. When Alice woke up, she realized she had caused trouble again. But when she saw that Kalis's condition had stabilized, she let out a sigh of relief. Alice decided that before leaving, she would do her best to take care of him. That day, Alice came to the temple again. This time, she noticed that the coachman's voice didn't match his apparent age. It sounded very young. Sienna noticed her reaction and asked what was wrong. Alice explained that the weather was nice today, so she was just in a good mood. After Alice left, Sienna turned back and exchanged several meaningful glances with the coachman. It seemed his identity was anything but ordinary. When Alice arrived at the prayer chamber, she discovered that holy power was not only healing power, it could also become a form of self-defense. This made Alice feel that her future was looking bright. Later, the cleric Roland led Alice to the part of the temple regularly open to care for commoners. This man was Prion, a high-ranking cleric of common birth. In a novel, he was described as someone who reformed the temple with powerful holy power and a mind as calm as the Tao itself. But that time when Lady Quillian prayed, it made Prion. He despised her because, when she came to pray, she once bumped into a commoner and then immediately took the life of the person who had run into her. Even though High Priest Prion was furious, the court sided with the nobles. The discord between the two was famous not only in the temple, but also in high society, which made Alice more cautious. If Quillian learned Alice's secret, she would definitely do everything in her power to get rid of her. According to the temple's laws, not everyone with a sacred calendar mark must become a priest. Considering all of this, rather than directly submitting an application, it would be better to get Prion on her side and ask for his help. Because Alice was Quillian's daughter-in-law, Prion did not welcome her at first. But after seeing her persistently come to the temple these past few days and do good deeds, his opinion of her began to change. Meanwhile, the coachman following Sienna was actually Kalis in disguise. The four of them had begun planning something today, and the man with the short hair was the aide Tessalai. That tearful-looking man was once David, commander of the Night Order. Kalis had come personally in disguise to gather information and learned that David had assembled all the knights. He felt their chances of overthrowing Quillian had greatly increased. The aide had also been investigating Quillian. He had continuously bribed Marquis Platine, who was famous for flattering the emperor, which was how his son managed to keep first place at the academy. Kalis had him gather the evidence that would help drag Quillian down completely. In truth, trying to poison Kalis alone was enough to get rid of Lady Quillian, but there was one hidden danger. That was the current emperor of the empire. Because the imperial family was corrupt, imperial authority had weakened day by day. Meanwhile, on the battlefield, Kalis had built up fame and power, and the Black Lion Knights surpassed the imperial family and the Imperial Night Order. The current emperor believed the throne's authority was being threatened. The first prince, the empire's only hope amid a rotten imperial family, was now unconscious. The second prince, who was notorious as a scoundrel, was very likely to become the next emperor. But the emperor had made it clear that he would not support the second prince, and so he trusted Kalis even less. Therefore, when the head of the ducal house fell, the emperor did nothing. He merely stood by and even allowed the unverified daughter of Count Godry to take the position of duchess. The emperor wanted Kalis dead, just like Lady Quillian did, and would protect Quillian no matter what. So Kalis and his people needed to gather as much evidence as possible, in case the emperor acted unreasonably. At that moment, in the temple infirmary, a child was hurt, and Alice used divine power to heal the child's wound. She also told them to keep it secret, and, of course, the children obediently listened to a priest. Alice's actions were fully seen by Prion. Alice still wanted to explain herself, but seeing her kindness, Prion smiled with relief. That was exactly the reaction Alice had hoped for. So she told Prion that she wanted to become a priest. Alice knew that even if someone was married, if they possess holy power, they could still become a servant of God. When Alice said that Lady Quillian would stop her from becoming a priest, Prion frowned. Alice then explained that she was a child abandoned by her family. Through some kind of deal between Lady Quillian and her family, she had become the Duchess of Diurla. As you know, my husband still hasn't awakened. For someone like me, with no future, this was the chief god's sudden grace. Alice did not know whether she could truly move him, but as she spoke like that, she herself almost couldn't hold back her tears. In the end, Prion solemnly agreed to her request. At the same time, Kalis, hidden in the dark, heard their conversation and thought that Alice had found the perfect person to protect her. Thinking of the hard life Alice had lived, Kalis did not know whether keeping her here was the right thing to do. But no matter what, he did not want to lose this ray of light. Alice, you have successfully caught your husband's attention. A few days after Prion agreed to help Alice, Lady Quillian mentioned that in 3 days, priests would come to the estate to treat Kalis. Once a month, priests visited the ducal house to use holy power on the fallen Kalis. Although their holy power was of no help to Kalis's recovery, Lady Quillian still summoned them every month to pretend to the outside world that she was carefully tending to the Duke. The priests received enormous donations from Lady Quillian, so they had no reason to refuse. The very next day, Alice told Prion about it. Prion thought it was a good opportunity. He could go to the ducal house under the pretext of a regular visit, and then announce that Alice was becoming a priest that day. That was also Alice's plan. At last, the day had arrived. But when it truly came time to leave, Alice felt somewhat reluctant. In the end, however, she suppressed her attachment, and then the temple carriage arrived at the estate. But to Quillian's surprise, Prion had come as well. When Quillian saw him, she couldn't resist provoking him. Prion, in turn, remarked that she did not seem at all worried about her son's illness. Quillian instantly exploded, thinking he actually dared to suspect her. But Prion explained, "My lady, every month you donate a large sum to the temple for your son, also that he may be treated with full devotion. So today, as well, we will do everything in our power so that your sincerity may reach the chief god." Quillian was left speechless by Prion's words. After that, the priests entered the Duke's room and treated him together. Aside from Prion, all the other priests had been bought by Quillian. When the treatment was over, Prion told them that they had come for another purpose as well, to take away a new priest. Taking the opportunity, Alice stepped forward and declared her determination to become one. Alice's words made Quillian's head spin. Alice then explained that, by becoming a priest, she would pray for the Duke's and his mother's safety for the rest of her life. Seeing that she dared defy her orders, Quillian flew into a rage and warned her not to become a priest, or she would make sure she died horribly. Prion stood in front of Alice. That only made Quillian even angrier, and she insisted this was her house. But Prion said that if the Duchess wished to become a priest, then it was no longer merely a matter of the ducal house. Alice had not expected Quillian to react so strongly and feared that if this continued, Prion would bear unnecessary responsibility. Alice explained that she herself had asked High Priest Prion for help. She said the Duke had shown no improvement, so she wanted to become a priest and pray for the House of Diurla. When Quillian saw that Alice would not obey, she prepared to punish her harshly. Suddenly, Kalis sat bolt upright in bed. The sight almost made Lady Quillian faint, and even Alice was shocked. The first thing he said upon waking was, "Is Alice my Duchess?" The look in his eyes was truly terrifying. Quillian didn't know how to answer for a moment, so Kalis repeated the question. Quillian could only explain that it was all for his own good. "As your mother, I had no time to care for your personal life, so I found you a wife to look after you." Then Kalis deliberately shifted the focus toward Alice and Prion. Prion told him that the Duchess wished to become a priest, but now that the Duke had awakened, everyone felt there was no longer any need for her to do so. Kalis told them to return in half a month. He said everything was too chaotic at the moment, and his body was still weak. Once things had stabilized in half a month, he would listen to the Duchess's decision then. Alice's wish to leave had now been crushed. That was also part of Kalis's plan. He intended to keep this woman here, and next he was going to have a proper talk with his wife. The empty room was left with only a man and a woman. Alice had never expected her husband to suddenly wake up. This was completely outside her plans. And Alice felt that, no matter how it looked, she seemed like Lady Quillian's person right now. Just as her husband, Kalis advanced step by step, Alice dropped to her knees with a thud. "My lord, please be magnanimous. Don't hold a commoner's faults against her. No, I mean a great man doesn't blame a lesser one. Lady Quillian ordered me to kill your grace, but I absolutely never obeyed. There's also a witness. His name is Helkin, the ducal physician." Kalis did not blame her. Instead, he was worried she would catch cold kneeling on the floor. Seeing that expression on his face, Alice thought she must be imagining things. Alice felt extremely embarrassed. Kalis told her that the reason he had been able to wake up was because her holy power had healed him. "Miss Holy Lady said my divine power brought you back to life. Then when I used holy power for the first time, were you already conscious?" Kalis replied, "Does that matter?" Only then did Alice realize just how humiliating this was. All the things she had said before, and even wiping his body and the like. Seeing how flustered she was, Kalis told her that he had only occasionally regained a little awareness, and that he had fully recovered consciousness only at dawn today. Alice said, "But when you just woke up, didn't you say you didn't know?" Kalis seriously replied that it was all because of her. Healing holy power was very rare. At present, the only person with that level of ability was probably High Priest Prion, a candidate for the next pope. Kalis told her that under those circumstances, if such a promising new talent suddenly appeared, the priests would never let her go. It was said that even among the high priests, internal rivalry was severe, so there would be those who praised Alice and those who opposed her. Then Alice would be dragged into a power struggle and might even become a sacrifice. So Kalis hoped she would stay by his side and not become a priest. Alice firmly refused his request. Seeing he could not keep her that way, Kalis told her that if she stayed, whether it was money or power, he would give her anything she wanted. "If you don't like money or power, then even my body is yours." Although that was very tempting, something in her instincts told her she absolutely could not agree. Alice tactfully said that if she stayed by the Duke's side, Lady Quillian would never spare her. Kalis told her not to worry, because Lady Quillian would soon be driven out of the ducal house. Alice said, "In that case, I'm your savior, so let me become a priest." But Kalis still refused. Helpless, Alice said, "I don't understand. You're already alive, so there's no reason for me to stay here anymore." But Kalis did not want to let her go so easily. He told her he had not fully recovered yet. "You pull me out of a hellish darkness, so you have to take responsibility." Alice was left speechless. Then she asked him whether, if she still wanted to become a priest after half a month, he would help conceal her holy power. Kalis swore on his life that he would never let her be in danger. That night, Alice truly went to find Helkin to confirm whether Kalis's body had fully recovered. Alice found his room in a terrible state. If she had guessed correctly, it had to be Lady Quillian's doing. Helkin could only brush the dust off himself and say that being alive was enough. Alice felt that he looked rather pitiful. Knowing that he had not exposed the matter, she also felt he was not bad to the core. Alice stated the reason for her visit. She wanted to know the Duke's physical condition. Helkin said that although he still needed time to recover, he would get better soon. "But as for me, my own life is no longer guaranteed." So he told Alice that if she had no other business, she should go back and rest. Alice advised him that if he wanted to live, he had to abandon the senior madam first and tell the Duke the whole truth. That was his only way out. Before leaving, Alice patted him on the shoulder, hoping he would take her words to heart. Helkin had never expected that one day someone would care about him too. When Sienna learned that it was the Duchess who had saved her brother, she could hardly believe it. Kalis told her that Alice's holy power was strong enough to save lives, so it was best to keep silent about it. Sienna asked, "Then from the very beginning, did the Duchess have nothing to do with Lady Quillian?" Kalis told her that the Duchess had never had anything to do with Quillian from the very start, and that his sister should simply avoid alarming the enemy. Adolf asked his master whether he would return to work immediately. Kalis felt that if he returned right away, they would probably use his illness to stop him. Once my people come back, I'll go to the palace first. That evening, Helkin was summoned by Kalis, who asked what he and the Duchess had talked about that night. Helkin said it was nothing much, only that she was worried about him and gave him some advice. But from Kalis's point of view, it sounded like Helkin was boasting, saying, "The young Duchess came all the way over at night because she was worried about me." Kalis coldly said, "It seems you and the Duchess are rather close." Helkin hastily explained that the Duchess had only come to ask about the Duke's physical condition. Only then did Kalis stop nitpicking. In fact, the reason he had summoned him was that he would be going to the palace in a week and wanted Helkin to examine a poison patient there. The person poisoned in the palace was the first prince. The fact that the prince had been bedridden for years was widely known throughout the empire. There was one more thing Kalis needed him to do. Lady Quillian would soon try to kill him again. This plan would use Helkin. Since letting outsiders in was dangerous, he was to pretend to obey orders and record every word in this device, then present it as evidence on the day of accusation. Seeing a chance to save himself, Helkin thought that if he could bring down Quillian and also cure the first prince, he might truly atone for his crimes. He immediately agreed to the Duke. Meanwhile, a very cute maid named Irene appeared at Alice's side. She was a maid specially assigned to her by the Duke. Irene treated her respectfully and worked diligently, making Alice feel very comfortable. Later, on the way to eat, Alice ran into Sienna. At that moment, Lady Quillian also happened to appear. She accused Alice, saying that after talking about becoming a priest and throwing the household into chaos, she was now shamelessly wandering around as if nothing had happened. But Sienna found that absurd. Didn't the Duchess say she wanted to become a priest for His Grace's sake? And I believe His Grace woke up because of the Duchess's prayers. Yet, Lady Quillian, you don't seem happy at all that His Grace awoke. Seeing the atmosphere turn bad, Alice wanted to slip away first. When Quillian noticed that Alice had a maid by her side, she instantly flew into a rage. "How dare you act on your own and ignore your mistress? Kneel at once. I'll make an example of you." Alice shielded Irene behind her. Lady Quillian demanded, "Alice, are you defying my orders?" Alice replied that Irene had only been doing her duty. Punishing Irene for that was unreasonable. Sienna also felt that Lady Quillian's behavior was unbecoming. Seeing the two of them contradict her, Quillian wanted to teach Alice a lesson. Just then, there was a sharp smack, and Lady Quillian looked stunned. It turned out Sienna had stepped in front of Alice. Sienna merely touched the wound and told Quillian that no matter how angry she was, she should not strike people herself. It was a matter of noble dignity. At that moment, the Duke's butler also appeared. Seeing him, Quillian did not want to alert anyone and said she was merely disciplining the household. Before leaving, she warned Alice not to challenge her authority again, then slunk away. Alice was very worried about Sienna's wound. She lamented that such a beautiful face had been injured by that madwoman and that it must have hurt terribly. Seeing Alice so flustered, Sienna couldn't help but laugh. "If the Duchess had hit you, you might have been sent flying. You look so small and soft, like a rabbit." Alice asked Sienna to come with her somewhere to talk. Alice quietly used holy power to heal Sienna's injury. Sienna was very grateful to Alice, because thanks to her prayers, her brother had regained consciousness. Alice noticed that the Duke seemed to be keeping the true strength of her holy power secret. So Sienna hoped that for the time being, she and Alice could get along well. Alice only smiled awkwardly and said that was fine. Alice knew that in the original story, there were not many people who got close to Sienna and survived. Lady Quillian, meanwhile, was furious. Kalis had been awake only one day and had already climbed over her head. The head maid told her to calm down. Quillian said that every time she thought about Alice stabbing her in the back, she wanted to cut off her head. Whether it was Merta or Kalis, both were protecting Alice. The head maid said that the Duke believed he had awakened because of the young Duchess's prayers. Since the Duke was not wary of the young Duchess, they should seize control of her again and use her to monitor the Duke. And doesn't my lady already know the young Duchess's weakness? Those words reminded Quillian of something. Count Godry was Alice's father. As long as it was her father, she would be like a puppet. Back then, Alice had not resisted even once before getting into the carriage headed for the ducal house. Quillian decided to personally send a letter reminding her father. She believed that would make Alice much more obedient. A week later, after learning of the matter, her father immediately began berating Alice. Her mother told her, "Have you forgotten that it is Lady Quillian who supports our Count's house? And this is how you repay that kindness?" Her father ordered her to kneel at once and beg Lady Quillian for forgiveness. Alice did not understand why, when she had done nothing wrong, she had to bow and scrape before others. Where father saw her talking back, he prepared to threaten her. Alice told them, "Wasn't the favor my brother received the price of selling me to the ducal house?" Her words stunned her parents. "You knew perfectly well what Lady Quillian wanted me to do, yet you still sold me to the ducal house." Her father told her to lower her voice and said that the only way to survive was to obey Lady Quillian's orders forever. "You're not planning to abandon your family, are you?" Alice found that laughable. It was clearly her parents who had abandoned her, yet they were saying that she was the one abandoning them. She hoped that after her mother and the others went back, they would never meet again. But her brother rebuked her. "How dare you act up toward your family? Kneel at once." Suddenly, memories of Alice's childhood surfaced in the heroine's mind. She felt that Alice's brother was complete trash. Alice mocked him. "A useless failure who can only depend on his parents' dares to spout nonsense in front of me?" Her brother, seeing that, wanted to teach Alice a lesson just like before. Then, with a bang, the Duke made a dazzling entrance. Kalis saw that his wife had not been hurt, but also realized there was always trash around her, ruining his mood. "Was it you trash just now, trying to lay a hand on my Duchess? A man without even a title dares to touch the Duchess of Diurla?" By then, her brother's legs had already gone weak with fear. Kalis looked at him and asked how this trash should be dealt with. They had sold off their daughter and not even offered a single apology. To avenge Alice, the heroine made a decision that went against all propriety. She drove her own family out and forbade them from ever stepping into the Diurla ducal house again. Although Alice was grateful to him, she still did not plan to stay in the ducal house because of this. Kalis said he had not helped her in order to be repaid. "My lady." Alice did not understand. "Why do you keep calling me my lady?" Kalis replied, "Didn't I say so just now? That's your title, and as your husband, shouldn't I call my wife my lady?" Seeing that she was getting shy, Kalis stopped teasing her. But aside from that, he felt such a punishment was too light and said that with a single raised hand, he could destroy them all. Alice didn't want anyone's life taken and felt this was enough. Suddenly, Kalis took Alice's hand and kissed it, telling her she just needed to rest well now. Alice's heart started pounding from the sudden turn of events, and she hurried away. Adolphe could tell that his master seemed interested in the young Duchess. In Kalis's childhood, he had watched his mother nearly collapse for love. In the name of righteous love, his father had ruined many lives. Kalis, however, was the complete opposite of them. He believed those feelings were fleeting and hollow, so he had resolved never to love. But in Kalis's eyes, Alice was his savior. If he could not even give this much sincerity to the person who saved him, could he still be called human? Adolphe could say nothing more and thought he had spoken too much. In truth, what Kalis said was not the whole truth. He knew clearly that whenever he saw Alice, his heart became extremely restless. The next day, Quillian learned that the Duke had gone to the palace and angrily berated the maids for not reporting it sooner. Great. Now everyone knows the Duke is awake. But the head maid reminded her whether she had forgotten that there was still one trump card left to play. On the other side, before leaving, the Duke worried that Alice would not eat enough, so he had the maids attentively care for her. Kalis brought Helkin with him to the palace. He greeted the Emperor as he had before, but the Emperor was not happy at all. With such a sharp and capable man at his side, the Emperor had long since lost his composure. Kalis thanked the Emperor for ignoring all the formal procedures and allowing his marriage, so that he had been able to wake under the careful care of his Duchess. Kalis had not expected that the Emperor would not only ignore the Empire's greatest ducal house, but also stand by and do nothing while Lady Quillian took control of it. That was almost the same as abandoning it. But it was no wonder. All of it was because the Emperor feared that I coveted the royal family's power. He would probably remain wary of me until I died. But no matter what, the reason Kalis came today was to reclaim his position as military commander. The moment the Emperor heard that, he panicked and said it was not that he did not want to return it, but that the post was currently held by Count Bell, so he could not suddenly replace him like that. Someone beside the Emperor offered a delaying tactic, suggesting that the proposal be discussed at next month's regular meeting. Kalis readily agreed. The second reason he had come today was that he wanted to see His Highness, the first prince. Elsewhere, after eating too much, Alice wanted to go for a walk. She discovered there was even a separate annex on the estate grounds, though it felt rather eerie. She had meant to go back, but then spotted one of Lady Quillian's maids in the distance. Alice felt it would be bad if she were seen, so she decided to hide in the annex. Then she discovered another person had arrived too. The man said he wanted to go inside as well. Hearing that they were coming in, Alice panicked. The woman told him, "That place is where the former Duchess lived when she died. Do you know how scared I was when I accompanied the senior madam there? Another maid even said she saw a ghost there. I absolutely won't go in." Alice realized that this annex was where Kalis's mother had lived. The woman handed the man a note. The man said, "Isn't this the place that sells poison?" He then added, "The Duke is already awake. If anything goes wrong this time, we'll all die." The woman reminded him, "Have you forgotten that after the Duke collapsed, you fed him poison several times? The senior madam is already facing the danger of being thrown out. If that happens, we'll really die." The man had no choice but to compromise and asked how he was supposed to poison the Duke under such tight guard. The woman told him not to worry. "As long as you bring it back, once Dr. Helkin checks the medicine, he'll know what to do. Bring it within 2 days, because in 3 days it will be young Master Edelm's return." Neither of them knew that Alice had heard every detail of their vile plan. The Empire had 3 princes in total. The first prince, Clichino, was the son of the late Empress. The second prince, Axion, was the son of the current Empress, while the third prince had been born from a one-night encounter with a maid who attended the Emperor. Of the 3, the most capable was the first prince, but he had fallen into a coma 2 years ago due to a poisoning incident. The second prince was nothing like the current Empress, who was known for her virtue. Instead, he was notorious in noble society for behaving like a thug. As for the third prince, he was called the Emperor's Stain, a figure whose face few even knew. Since he had entered the struggle for power, Kalis needed the first prince. More precisely, there was currently no one else who could replace him. Helkin diagnosed that the first prince had been poisoned by the neurotoxin of a plant called rhubarb, which grew in the palace of the Desert Kingdom on the Western continent. It would not kill a person immediately upon ingestion, but would cause them to lose consciousness and fall into hallucinations. Kalis was somewhat impressed by his skill. Even the palace physicians, and indeed any physician in the empire, had been unable to identify the poison, yet he had named it at once. It seemed that calling him a genius was no exaggeration, but Helkin told him that the prince had been poisoned for too long, and many of his internal organs were badly damaged. The antidote could only be bought in the Desert Kingdom, and making it would take a long time. By the time it arrived, the prince's condition would probably worsen even further. That made Kalis think of someone who could make a miracle happen. The next day, Kalis was very happy when Alice came to find him of her own accord. Alice told him that someone was trying to poison and kill the Duke, but Kalis looked completely calm. That left Alice at a loss, so she carefully described some of the details she had overheard them discussing. But Kalis merely gave a casual thank you, and then asked her whether she had thought about his earlier question. Alice hesitated for a moment, remembering how she had been so worried about all this last night that she could not sleep. Yet he was being so indifferent. In Kalis's eyes, those assassination attempts were all under his control. But Alice was not like him. The more she thought about it, the angrier she became. "You kept me up all night worrying, and you're still this calm?" So she turned and walked away. Coldly, she told Kalis that her answer was still the same. She wanted to become a priest. There was nothing more to say. Kalis realized he had messed up, but he did not know what exactly he had done wrong. So he told Adolphe about it, explaining that he had already known about this plan because he himself had set the stage for Lady Quillian to carry it out. Adolphe thought that while that might be true, the young Duchess did not know the inside story, so she had probably misunderstood and thought His Grace had not listened seriously to what she said. Only then did Kalis realize that he had ignored Alice's feelings and failed to consider how she felt. So he wrote a letter of apology, told Adolphe to deliver it to her, and instructed him to bring some desserts his wife liked. Adolphe could hardly believe his master had personally written an apology letter. 2 days later, Kalis's half-brother Edelm arrived at the ducal estate. But the dinner banquet was held as usual, which made Alice somewhat worried, even though she had received Kalis's apology letter. Faced with his resolute gaze, she could only choose to trust him. At the banquet, Quillian asked Alice why she was sitting there alone with such a gloomy face. "You really have no sense at all." But Alice simply ignored Lady Quillian, leaving Quillian seething. Seeing his mother humiliated, Edelm deliberately brought up the disturbance caused by his sister-in-law, trying to become a priest, saying that making such a scene was disgraceful. Alice, however, refuted him, saying it had not been some huge uproar at all. Right now, everyone is happy, saying His Grace woke up because of my prayers. And the day His Grace awoke is a day of great significance. Yet to you, young master, it's nothing but a disturbance? Kalis merely said, "Don't be too presumptuous, Edelm." Edelm had thought that even if she was a fake duchess, his older brother would still take his side. But in the next moment, that fantasy shattered, because before everyone present, Kalis declared his wife's authority here. Edelm was left miserable. At that moment, Quillian had the servants bring over the dessert she had prepared carefully, telling him that these sweets also carried her prayer for his health. Inside, however, Quillian was overjoyed, convinced her plan was flawless. Just as Kalis was about to eat the dessert, Helkin suddenly burst in and stopped him. He told Kalis that the dessert was poisoned. Seeing her plan ruined, Quillian instantly flew into a frenzy. She told the Duke that he absolutely could not trust Helkin's one-sided claim. But Kalis felt that a physician in charge of his treatment would not make up something like this on his own, and he ordered Dr. Helkin to explain who was behind it all. Without hesitation, Helkin pointed at Quillian and produced the recording device, exposing the truth that Lady Quillian had tried to murder the Duke. Seeing herself betrayed, Quillian intended to drag everyone down with her, but it was like throwing an egg against a stone. Kalis told her, "How could you be so foolish?" Only then did Quillian realize something was wrong. Kalis told her that if she had not done anything stupid, he might have spared their lives. He had not expected that she would even abandon the life of her own child. Kalis ordered David of the Night Order to handle the matter. Everyone present was astonished. The Duke had decisively regained control of the knights. Afterward, Quillian and her son were thrown into the dungeon. At the same time, the Royal Knight Order also arrived. The man told the Duke that he had come under the Emperor's orders to arrest the criminals. His name was Hades, commander of the First Royal Knight Order. He was also the watchdog of the true mastermind. Anyone who stood in his master's way would be killed without mercy. He was an extremely cruel man. Alice knew how terrifying this man was. In the original story, he appeared only after Lady Quillian had destroyed the Duke. David strongly objected because they were grievous criminals who had attempted to poison the Duke, so why should those people take them away? Kalis wanted to know what charges they were being arrested for. Hades explained that they were charged with grade manipulation at the National Academy, as well as improper solicitation and bribery. Because the matter concerned the Academy's reputation, the Emperor had ordered a full investigation. He even produced an imperial decree. Kalis found it ridiculous. The bribery case that had been quietly ignored all this time just happened to surface today. But since it was the Emperor's decree, Kalis could not openly tear up all decorum, so he had no choice but to let them take Quillian and her son away. At that moment, Hades noticed Alice beside him and asked whether she was the Duchess everyone had been talking about. Alice became wary. More than that, she was afraid. Kalis immediately noticed and stepped in front of her, saying, "I never expected Sir Hades to be interested in such vulgar gossip from high society." What a surprise! Hades tactfully replied that because his lord had taken an interest, he had grown curious as well without realizing it. "If I offended you, I apologize." Kalis responded that tomorrow he would properly report to His Majesty everything that had happened today, so the Emperor would not worry unnecessarily. After Hades left, the heroine knew that the lord he had mentioned was not the Emperor. He served someone else entirely. Alice was very conflicted about whether to tell Kalis all of this, thinking that even if she did, no one would probably believe her. Seeing that her complexion looked bad, Kalis wanted to know what had happened. At that moment, the aide Tessalai appeared and seemed to have urgent matters to discuss with Kalis. Not wanting to disturb them, Alice went back to her room with Sienna. Kalis had noticed that although Alice looked surprised, she still seemed frightened, and he could not tell what exactly she was afraid of. Tessalai reported that many royal knights had also gone to the house of Marquis Platine, who had accepted Lady Quillian's bribes. So he believed the Emperor knew they had intended to strike first. If things continued like this, His Majesty would not conduct a proper investigation and would simply reduce Lady Quillian's crimes before sentencing her. Because of the imperial decree, there was no other way for now. But But to deal with a situation like this, all they needed was enough evidence. Still, the more Kalis thought about it, the stranger it felt. The Emperor had orchestrated all of this, but he was not that kind of man, nor did he have anyone that clever by his side. And there really was one such person, the current Empress, Larry. She was called the only light in the corrupt imperial family, a woman with no flaws anyone could find. Alone amid that mad royal household, she radiated a noble, aloof brilliance. Yet from a common-sense perspective, it was precisely because she seemed too perfect that people found her suspicious. Kalis recalled how not long ago, in front of the first prince's palace, the empress had apologized to him on the emperor's behalf. She had also mentioned that now that the duke had awakened, she intended to ask his majesty to treat the marriage as though it had never happened. But Kalis had refused. He had no intention of divorcing Alice. The empress had not expected the duke to be so devoted to his duchess, and had found herself wanting to meet her. At the time, Kalis had not thought much of it. But now, thinking back, he wondered whether her sudden mention of the marriage had truly been kindness or something else. The next day, Alice felt deeply uneasy. She asked Prion to handle the paperwork for entering the temple. Even if Kalis had awakened, Alice had already become a priestess. She had brought the impossible to awaken Kalis back from unconsciousness. And now Tasis, who originally appeared only in the latter half of the novel, had shown up as well. Alice knew that, without her realizing it, the original plotline was becoming more and more distorted. Before things got worse, she wanted to leave the ducal house. But things did not go as planned. The Empress wanted to see Alice in person. Since it was an imperial summons, Alice had no good way to refuse. The Empress seemed delighted to meet the Duchess. Alice, however, looked shocked the moment she saw her. Though the Empress was older, her elegant beauty had not faded in the slightest. She was even comparable to rose-like Sienna. In fact, she was more beautiful than the novel had described, and yet there was no doubt about it. This woman was the final boss of the story. Using her beautiful appearance and lofty status, the Empress manipulated several lovers as though they were her chess pieces. In addition, to make her own son emperor, she had murdered many people. The first victims were the former empress and the first prince. Next came Kalis, who had openly declared that he would not support the second prince. After that, the faction supporting the third prince, along with Sienna Merta's close aides, was also wiped out. Her ultimate goal was to place her son on the throne and thereby seize control of the entire empire herself. Alice panicked. If anything went wrong here, she might never walk out of the Empress's palace alive. A chill shot up her spine, and cold sweat broke out all over her body. The Empress already knew that it was Alice who had used holy power to drag Duke Diurla back from death's door. What Alice had thought was a perfectly hidden secret had been under the Empress's gaze the entire time. Alice forced herself to stay calm. I do possess holy power, but that little bit of power is nowhere near enough to save a life. Only power on the level of a pope could bring someone back from the brink of death, could it not? At first, I thought so too. A knowing smile curled at the Empress's lips. But the Duke protected you with everything he had. That made me certain that you possess a power too great to be ignored. Alice's heart sank. She knew the woman had an ulterior motive, so she simply asked directly, "What does your majesty want me to do?" The Empress stopped speaking in circles and replied bluntly, "I can help you ascend to the position of Pope. In return, you will help me place the second prince on the throne." Alice stiffened. The empire had worshipped the god Helios for generations, and the temple and imperial family had always remained strictly separate. The imperial house had no authority to interfere in the appointment of a pope. This was one of the temple's iron laws. Likewise, the pope could not involve themselves in the struggle for imperial power. Anyone who violated that would face divine punishment. Yet the empress before her had brazenly proposed such a treasonous bargain as though the law meant nothing. Alice instantly grasped the key point. Prion would never reveal the secret of her holy power. The only possibility was that the empress had planted spies inside the temple, and not low-ranking priests either. If Alice agreed and became pope, she would become the empress's most obedient puppet. The peaceful, comfortable life she had once longed for would vanish completely. She had to refuse. Just as Alice was at a total loss, her thoughts in chaos, the sound of fighting suddenly rang out. It was Kalis. After learning that Alice had been forcibly brought to the Empress's palace, he had barged in without hesitation. Alice looked at him as though a drowning person had found driftwood, and hope instantly flared in her eyes. "How dare you? This is Her Majesty's private palace. How could you break in here?" a maid cried, stepping forward to stop him. Kalis first bowed to the Empress in apology, but there was an unmistakable urgency in his voice. "This servant learned that my wife had suddenly been taken away, and even the royal knights insisted on barring the way. I was so overcome with worry that I offended your highness in my haste. I am willing to accept punishment." The Empress did not make things difficult for him. She merely watched coldly. Kalis quickly crossed to Alice's side, his fingertips lightly touching her pale cheek. "I truly did not expect the Duke and Duchess to be so deeply devoted to one another," the Empress remarked with false sentiment. "My wife is unwell. I sincerely ask your highness to allow me to take her back to the estate to recover." Kalis spoke directly, leaving no room for negotiation. Alice was overjoyed inside. As long as she could leave this place, she would have time to think carefully. But just before she departed, the Empress suddenly called out to her, a strange look in her eyes. "Did you not enjoy our conversation today, Duchess?" Alice responded tactfully, neither servile nor arrogant. "I am mediocre and lacking in talent. I am not worthy of remaining often at your Majesty's side, much less laughing and speaking freely with you." The Empress's expression darkened at once, and her voice turned cold. "How unfortunate. I had thought I might finally gain a dear friend after so long." The moment she stepped out of the Empress's palace, Alice finally let out a true sigh of relief, as though she had just walked back from the gates of death. "What did the Empress say to you?" Kalis asked in a low voice. Alice's heart tightened, and she found it hard to answer. The Empress's treasonous words were unsupported by evidence. To accuse her recklessly without proof would only invite death. Besides, the Empress had always cultivated the image of a virtuous and gracious woman. Even if Alice told him, Kalis might not believe her so easily. She raised her eyes to him and asked softly, "You said before that you would grant me one wish. Does that still stand? I want to go somewhere far away from the Empire." Back at the ducal estate, Kalis fell into thought. Alice's reaction had been far too unusual. Why would a woman who could calmly handle even Lady Quillian's malice, and who never showed weakness, fear the Empress so much? He wanted to ask, but feared pressing too hard and making this person he had only just managed to keep by his side suddenly disappear. Left with no choice, Kalis could only send people in secret to investigate what the Empress was truly relying on. At the same time, Alice did not remain idle either. She pulled out paper and pen and frantically sorted through the plot of the original novel, laying out the current situation clearly. The first path: if she refused the Empress, death was certain. The temple had long since been infiltrated by the Empress. Even what Alice had believed to be a safe haven was full of traps. In the entire empire now, there was only one truly safe place: the Diurla ducal estate. More precisely, only by staying by Kalis's side could she survive. Alice sighed helplessly. After all her circling around, she still could not escape fate's arrangement. If that was the case, then she had to change the ending. Kalis could not die. She had to join hands with him and bring down the final villain, the Empress. But how could she reveal the truth to Kalis? In the original work, the Empress's true face was exposed only after the third prince and Sienna returned from subjugating monsters. Her attempted assassination of the third prince left traces behind, and only then was she unmasked. But by that time, everything would be far too late. Then Alice suddenly remembered an earlier clue: Lady Rosetta's death. That accident at the royal hunting tournament had in fact been the Empress's doing. If Kalis could personally attend the hunting tournament and witness the Empress's scheme with his own eyes, then they would hold the trump card for a decisive blow. Just as hope ignited in Alice's heart, a faint sound suddenly came from the balcony. An assassin. She had not expected the Empress to be this ruthless. Negotiations had just broken down, and she had immediately sent someone to take Alice's life. The assassin thought Alice was lying in bed and drove a dagger down viciously. Alice took the chance to flee desperately, but the door was suddenly pushed open, and another assassin blocked the way, raising his sword toward her. At that critical moment, Alice barely dodged. Driven into a corner, she grabbed cosmetics and a vase from the table and hurled them wildly. The vase struck the assassin in the forehead, but it did nothing to stop his determination to kill her. Alice suddenly remembered that holy power could be used offensively. She immediately activated it, and a flash of golden light shot out. The small wound on the assassin's body was healed instantly. Alice was dumbfounded. She had actually used her holy power to heal the enemy. The assassin sneered and raised his sword as he advanced. Just as death loomed over her, the door was kicked open with a bang. "Stop!" The assassin's attention was drawn away at once. Seizing the chance, Alice shoved him over with all her strength and stumbled behind, Kalis, clutching tightly at the hem of his clothes. Outside the estate, a fire suddenly broke out, and the servants cried out in alarm, "Thief! Catch the thief!" Alice knew very well that this was nothing more than the assassin's trick to cover up the truth. Kalis's eyes turned icy. Standing protectively before Alice, he said, "Not a thief." This was a premeditated assassination. One scream after another rang out. Alice covered her ears, too afraid to look. A moment later, the sounds of battle died down. Kalis had dealt with every assassin. He lifted a hand and wiped the blood from his cheek. Alice glanced at the corpses strewn across the floor, and her legs gave out beneath her. She collapsed into Kalis's arms. Only then did she truly understand how cruel this world was. More than fear, she worried about Kalis's safety. After bathing, Kalis came to find her. Moonlight spilled across his broad, well-defined chest. Alice's face instantly flushed red. She hurriedly thanked him. "Thank you for saving me again." "It was what I should do," Kalis said firmly. "And those men were trained assassins. Do you have anyone in mind who might be behind this?" Alice fell silent. By day, the Empress had appeared so dignified and benevolent, and by night she had sent assassins. Even if Alice spoke, Kalis might find it hard to accept. "I don't know." Kalis did not press further. "It's all right. I'll interrogate the survivors and investigate the clues to find the one behind this." At last, Alice made her decision. "I accept your earlier proposal." Kalis froze slightly. "I will use 1 year and my holy power to completely heal your body. Someone is determined to kill me now. I need your protection." Kalis did not hesitate in the slightest. His gaze burned. "For this year, I will do everything in my power to protect you." Just then, his subordinate David came to report, "My lord, the surviving assassin killed himself the moment he woke up. It was done with extreme decisiveness. The person behind this must hold no ordinary status." Kalis's expression darkened, and he told him to withdraw. Kalis also told Alice to get some rest. But the thought of the corpses in her room sent chills all through her. She pleaded with the Duke to let her stay there. "I can sleep on the sofa." Surprise flashed in Kalis's eyes. Then he replied helplessly, "If I let you sleep on the sofa, I wouldn't be able to sleep either. I can sleep anywhere. I don't want to trouble you." Before she could finish, Kalis suddenly stood up and swept her into his arms. "Rather than try and talk you out of it, it's faster to carry you over directly." Kalis gave a low laugh. "Sleep well tonight." He even thoughtfully tucked the blanket over her. Alice had never expected him to go this far. Lying obediently on the soft bed, she soon fell peacefully asleep. Seeing how soundly she slept, Kalis thought with faint disbelief that she truly had no guard up at all. Kalis sat by the bedside, quietly watching her defenseless sleeping face, lost in thought. In the past, he had always guarded his family and his power, putting himself first above all else. Never had he trembled out of fear of losing someone. But when Alice fell into danger, the anger and fear surging in his heart had already surpassed even his desire for her holy power. He did not care about power anymore. He only cared whether she was safe. So that was it. Before he had even realized it, he had fallen in love with the woman who had suddenly entered his life. No matter how many times she tried to run away, he would never let go this time. Even if it cost him his life, he would protect this girl he treasured more than anything. He swore that this time, even if he had to give his life, he would protect the girl he loved most. The next morning, Alice received a letter from Prion. At the temple, he had learned about what happened at the ducal estate and had written at once out of concern. Today was also the day she had to formally give her answer about whether she would serve as a priestess. Alice made up her mind to refuse him in person. Meanwhile, Kalis was busy with government affairs. Once Alice had finished dressing, she went forward to greet him. "Did you sleep well last night?" There was a gentle smile in Kalis's eyes. "Thank you." Alice's cheeks reddened slightly. "You look busy. Is it because of the princes?" Kalis replied helplessly. "I will not support the crooked second prince, and the first prince is already beyond saving." I plan to look among the collateral branches of the imperial family for a suitable heir. I should be able to find a target at the hunting tournament. Alice's heart stirred. She reminded him tactfully, "Doesn't His Majesty still have another prince?" Kalis and his aide exchanged glances, then both shook their heads. The third prince's whereabouts are unknown. No one knows whether he is alive or dead. He was born from His Majesty's affair with a palace maid. His Majesty considered him the greatest disgrace of his life. From the moment he was born, he was cast into an abandoned palace in a remote corner of the imperial grounds. No one has ever seen his true face. Alice secretly made up her mind to create an opportunity for Kalis and the third prince to meet. She then said, "I need to go to the temple. I need to decline the priesthood appointment. I'll be back soon. I'll go with you." Kalis immediately put aside the official documents in his hands. Alice gave him a helpless look. He had just said he was busy with state affairs, yet now he was going to follow her. "Are you that worried about me?" Soon the carriage arrived at the temple. There, Alice met the priest Roland. The moment Roland saw Kalis beside her, he was startled. "This is Duke Diurla." Kalis naturally drew Alice into his arms, his tone carrying a possessiveness that was hard to miss. "It seems this priest is quite close to my wife." Instantly, envious gazes gathered from all around them. Feeling a little uncomfortable, Alice said softly, "I'm going to see the high priest. Please wait somewhere else for me." When she met Prion, Alice spoke with some guilt and declined the priesthood appointment. Prion was not angry. Instead, he said gently, "I know that before you wish to enter the temple in order to avoid Lady Quillian's mistreatment. As long as you are safe now, that is enough." Alice was enveloped by his gentle, saintly aura. Then she turned serious. "Prion, there's someone high up in the temple colluding with the imperial family." Prion's expression changed. "That is a secret dangerous enough to cost lives." "I know, but everything I'm saying is true." Alice's voice was firm. "The Empress tempted me to become Pope precisely to block you from ascending to that position." Prion chose to believe her, but warned, "My lady, this matter is extremely dangerous. It must never be spread outside. If word gets out by accident, your life will be in danger." Just then, a little girl suddenly bumped into Alice. Thrown off balance, Alice fell to the ground. "I'm sorry. I wanted to find my mother quickly, so I wasn't watching where I was going." The little girl was trembling with fear. "It's okay, don't be scared. I'm fine." Alice hurried to comfort her. Prion stepped forward to help Alice up. The moment she stood, a sharp pain shot through her ankle. Only then did she realize she had sprained it. Prion comforted the little girl, saying, "But next time you must watch where you're going, and you should apologize properly." The little girl was grateful that Big Sister had forgiven her. Alice told her to be more careful when walking in the future. The obedient little girl then scampered away on tiptoe. The way she moved was so adorable that both of them found it cute. Just then, Prion noticed Alice's injured ankle. "I'll treat you with holy power," he said. Alice said it was fine and that she could heal herself, but Prion told her that holy power could only be used on others, not on oneself. Holy light enveloped her ankle, and the warm power soothed the pain away. Alice had just thanked him when the heel of her shoe suddenly snapped. Left with no other choice, Prion reached out to support her. "Let me help you out. Take your hand off her." A cold voice rang out abruptly. Kalis had appeared at some point not far away, his dark eyes fixed on Prion's hand. Prion explained that he only wanted to escort the Duchess out because her heel had broken and meant nothing else by it. Afraid of a misunderstanding, Alice hurriedly explained, "I was hurt just now, and thanks to High Priest Prion, I was healed." Kalis spoke urgently. "You were hurt? Was it serious?" "It's already healed, Duke. There's no need to worry." Even after Prion left, Kalis still looked displeased. The next second, he bent down and once again scooped Alice into his arms. There was an oddly proud note in his tone. "This isn't the first time, so don't be surprised." He carried her straight out of the temple in full view of everyone, as if announcing to all that the woman in his arms was his wife. A satisfied smile rose at the corner of Kalis's mouth. Alice, on the other hand, was so embarrassed she wished she could disappear into the ground. Flustered, she struggled and asked him to put her down. Kalis only found her fussing adorable. Just then, David hurried over with dreadful news. Lady Quillian and young Master Edelm had committed suicide. Their bodies, along with a dagger and a will, had been delivered to the estate by Sir Hades. Hades' voice was cold and mocking. The sinners slit their own throats with a dagger. Even at the end, they wore faintly absurd smiles. Alice understood at once. This was no suicide at all. It was the Empress silencing them. Kalis understood as well. To drive me away for not supporting the second prince. I had thought Edelm would be used in a struggle over the ducal succession, but they knew too many secrets, so the one behind this discarded them like abandoned pieces. Kalis glanced toward Alice and discovered that she, too, was watching intently. David, standing nearby, felt it was a pity. We were only one step away from finding the person behind it through those clues. Kalis asked, "How is Tessalai's investigation into the Empress progressing?" Tessalai replied that there had been no movement at all. "Keep a close watch on Hades's every move. The truth must be hidden behind him," Kalis ordered in a deep voice. The last shred of familial affection he had for that cruel stepmother and younger brother disappeared completely. The next day, the ducal estate underwent a sweeping purge. Kalis dealt with every maid and servant involved in the poisoning and removed all of Lady Quillian's remaining influence from the estate. At the same time, a new guard appeared, Sir Lloyd, vice-captain of the Night Order, who was assigned to protect Alice closely at all times. In the original novel, he was one of the warriors who endured to the very end, fighting drenched in blood amid the monster tide. He was a trustworthy ally. From then on, Lloyd followed Alice everywhere without leaving her side, carrying out his duty with complete dedication. Looking at the bodyguard glued to her every step, Alice could only think helplessly that this close protection might be a bit too thorough. Once her safety was secured, Alice moved her core plan to the top of the agenda. She had to create an intersection between Kalis, the third prince, and Sienna, these three key figures. In the original novel, the third prince's life changed after he met Sienna. He had mistakenly eaten poisonous grass and nearly frozen to death. It was Sienna who saved him, and he fell in love at first sight. Willing to become the sword of her revenge, he resolved to compete for the position of crown prince for her sake. To make all that happen, she first had to tie Sienna and the third prince together. And before that, she herself had to become Sienna's friend. Alice decided to act immediately and took the initiative to invite Sienna out. She deliberately chose Roy Street. According to her memory of the novel, this was where the third prince often appeared. To make sure the plan would not fail, she had also prepared a special brooch with sleeping medicine hidden inside. She could not help worrying that if the two simply met in an ordinary way, without any special situation to catalyze things, they would most likely pass by each other as strangers, without a second thought. So this brooch was her way of creating, no matter what, an opportunity for a bond to form between them. Following her memory, Alice brought Sienna and the accompanying Sir Lloyd to a quiet alley. At the end of the alley was a bookstore, the very place the third prince often visited. As soon as they reached the alley's entrance, Alice accidentally collided head-on with a man walking toward her. His hat fell to the ground. She quickly bent to pick it up, but the instant she lifted her head, her breath caught. Golden hair, a pair of distinctive red eyes. Even in the shadows, they stood out sharply. It was the very person she had been searching for, the third prince. The third prince looked displeased under her fixed stare, especially because she was still clutching his hat and not letting go. At that moment, Sienna hurried over to support Alice and asked with concern, "Are you all right?" The moment Sienna turned her head, her gaze met the third prince's directly. Alice rejoiced inwardly. Yes, this was a fateful exchange of looks. But nothing happened, not the slightest ripple. It was as if she had merely seen a stranger. Unwilling to give up, Alice asked Sienna, "Wasn't that man handsome?" Sienna shook her head seriously. "No matter how handsome he is, he can't compare to my brother." Alice was helpless. Seeing the third prince turn and enter that bookstore, she immediately pulled Sienna in after him. Sienna already loved books, so the moment she entered the shop, the shelves drew her in and she became absorbed. Alice soothed her softly. "Take your time looking. We have plenty of time." Before long, the third prince picked out his books and prepared to pay and leave. Just then, the bookstore owner called cheerfully toward the back. "We just got a new batch of novels in the basement. Anyone interested can take a look." Alice's eyes lit up, and she seized the chance, deliberately speaking loudly. "Shopkeeper, I want that new novel." The owner teased. "Does this noble lady also enjoy those rather improper romance novels?" Beside her, Sir Lloyd's ears instantly turned red, and he awkwardly turned his face away. Alice had no mind for any of that and said decisively, "I'll take every new arrival." The owner was overjoyed, exclaiming that he had found himself a wealthy patron. Alice immediately turned to Lloyd and said, "Sir Lloyd, please help the owner bring the books up." Though somewhat surprised, Lloyd respectfully followed the owner down to the basement. After sending Lloyd away, Alice immediately chased after the third prince. She had to seize this chance to meet him alone. She did not notice that at a street corner not far away, Kalis had followed after her as well. He simply could not rest easy letting his wife go out alone. But in the blink of an eye, Alice had vanished from sight. Meanwhile, the moment Alice ran out of the alley, she was targeted by two thuggish ruffians. "A pretty little madam like you, all alone?" A cool voice suddenly sounded from behind her. "Stay away from her." It was the third prince. The very next second, however, the third prince was beaten to the ground by the thugs. Alice was stunned. Wasn't he a spirit contractor? Why was he hiding his abilities? Seeing their nuisance taken care of, the thugs moved in to have their fun with the lady. Alice had no time to think. She had already removed the brooch and gripped it in her hand. Pretending to be frightened, she lured the lead thug closer. Just as he reached out to grab her, she suddenly drove the brooch into his palm. The thug felt a wave of dizziness. His vision went black, and he fell straight to the ground, fast asleep. The other thug flew into a rage at the sight and charged at Alice, smacking the brooch from her hand. At that critical moment, the third prince, who had been lying on the ground, suddenly surged to his feet and threw himself with all his strength at the thug, slamming him hard onto the ground. The thug's head hit first with a dull thud, and he too passed out. Alice hurried over, only to find the third prince collapsed motionless on the ground. Carefully, she helped him up and saw that his injuries were even more serious than she had thought. What an idiot. He went this far just to hide his identity. Alice scratched her head helplessly. Soft golden light bloomed at her fingertips as she used holy power to heal him. The third prince was a fire spirit contractor. Spirit contractors were people who had formed pacts with spirits of nature. Besides fire, there were spirits of water, wind, trees, and more. Depending on the rank of the spirit they had contracted with, they could use spirit arts apart from ordinary magic. That was the third prince's special ability. Of course, even his power to change the color of his eyes came from spirit arts. On top of that, spirit contractors had long since vanished from the empire. So when the third prince first displayed his abilities, he drew enormous public attention. In the original novel, he only revealed that he was a spirit contractor long after getting to know Sienna. "Alice, are you all right?" Sienna's anxious voice called from a distance. A moment later, the two of them saw the third prince lying at the mouth of the alley along with the two thugs and were stunned. "What happened here?" Sienna asked hurriedly. Alice pointed at the unconscious third prince and explained, "He saved me. Those thugs were trying to attack me, and thanks to him stepping in, I was all right." Lloyd looked at the scene with a grim expression, inwardly thinking that this was bad. He would definitely be punished when they got back. "Why did you suddenly run out here?" Sienna asked in confusion. "I just saw a very cute cat and wanted to chase after it. I didn't expect something like this to happen." After a pause, Alice said seriously, "He is my lifesaver. I have to bring him back to the ducal estate and take proper care of him. We'll talk again once he wakes up." Next would be the first meeting between the third prince and Kalis. The encounter destined to change all of their fates was about to begin at the ducal estate.